Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blabbit. It's great to see you aboard for our Friday live stream. We stream to many different platforms, and just want to mention to everyone who's watching the show, please feel free to comment and become a part of the show. We'll be with you for about an hour or so, bringing you insights and experts and lots of great advice. Secrets, too. For those of you tuning in for the first time, my name is Paul Geiger. I am a public speaking coach and presentation expert out of New York City. I make sure that individuals and organizations are clear about their messaging and they're able to deliver it with a level of commitment, which leads to trust, which ultimately leads to persuasion. Hello, Mr. Glenn Ingram. How are you today?
Good morning, Paul. I'm well. Hope you are as well.
I
Hi,
am.
everyone. My name is Glenn Ingram. I've been working for the last 2 decades helping people become better listeners, better questioners, so that they can have more persuasion and have better success in the influence or the sales realm. Good morning, Wendy. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, Glenn, and delighted to be here.
Good to
Tell
have
everyone a
you.
few moments about yourself, please.
I'm a marketing coach and consultant for small business owners. And what I found over the years is that small business owners are fantastic at what they do, but they're not always so talented explaining what they do and doing the messaging and marketing. And I love to do that. And that's how I help small business owners promote themselves and get more clients.
Now, Wendy, I know your specialty is working with small business owners. Is part of the reason that what you do is so necessary is because small business owners often are wearing too many hats in their business, and marketing takes an incredible backseat. Is that a true observation of mine?
It is. It's a perfect observation. And the fact is that small business owners' talents are not necessarily in marketing. They're in whatever else they're doing. And they need to market, but they just don't need to waste their energies on that when they can reach out to somebody like myself, who's an expert in doing that with many, many years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and don't you think it's just paramount for business owners because as talking to them over the years as much as I have, they kind of have the feast and famine. They get busy doing jobs and then they don't have a job and they're busy trying to find that next job to kind of lower some of those peaks and valleys by having a constant message, by having constant information going out there so that their life isn't as much of a roller coaster.
Exactly, Glenn. And marketing to be effective has to be consistent. And if you don't have that time and energy to do it, you're wasting your time. It's not a one-off type of situation.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk about, in terms of marketing, which it can be a very overwhelming subject to have to market yourself, but let's talk about a little bit of low-hanging fruit. And that would be a secret weapon, something that small business owners have forgotten about. Maybe no one ever told them about it. What would you say that secret weapon in marketing is?
One secret weapon that oftentimes marketers or not marketers, but small business owners are surprised to hear about is actually making themselves vulnerable. We're all told to be as confident and supercharged as possible. And that actually over time can be a bit of a turnoff. And sharing a little bit about yourself, some of the problems you had, for example, some coaches are very good in sharing how they were struggling to make a living they really were at the end of the rope, and then they discovered XYZ, and now they're offering that to their clients.
Mhm.
And that makes you credible. It also makes you believable. And people feel like they know a little bit about you. They can trust you.
Mhm.
Now, I've heard some business owners, because they've been twice bitten, once shy, that say marketing sometimes is a four-letter word, or should be. So, what advice would you have them when someone's speaking with them about marketing, so that they can kind of be able to determine, is this person going to be right for me? Are they going to help me? Or are they just trying to get money from me?
I hear that a lot from people that I'm talking about working with me. They're just afraid that if they market, they're going to be sleazy. They're going to be that proverbial used car salesman and just not even smell nice. And what I tell them when they have those feelings is that they're actually leaving a lot on the table, and they're not letting their clients know their true value. And by marketing is really a service. It's based on your knowing that you have something to offer that's of value, you're going to help people. And without doing that, no one knows. You're hiding yourself. You're not out there extending an arm and extending your hand to help somebody. So you need to look at it as you're offering value. You're not offering sleaze. You're offering a service that can help others.
And what's interesting is that all of us are coaches, and each one of us, I'm sure, has a coach. And we understand that the reason you have a coach is because you need eyes and ears on the outside looking for your blind spots. And very often we fall into the category in terms of the area that we focus on, that we can't see the forest for the trees because we are so involved in the day to day. Do you have an example that you can share with our audience of someone who didn't realize that their branding message could be what you came up with? In other words, what you saw them as being, they had no idea. And where they started was ultimately not where they finished. Or they started with something that was very bland and vanilla, but came up with something that really made them stand out in the marketplace. Can you remember a branding statement, or I guess it's probably a branding statement, or maybe it's a branding theme that would be an example of that? Does anything come to mind in your years?
I find, Paul, that many clients have that vanilla statement, for example, on their LinkedIn. They say business coach, business consultant. They could be 3 zillion people, and they haven't drilled down to determine what makes what they do distinctive. They're doing very special things, they're just not talking about it. So, for example, one client of mine, a business consultant who just had business consultant, uh, in talking to him, I realized he was doing phenomenal work. He just wasn't sharing it. For example, when he worked with clients, they typically increase their revenues 30%. And so we added that to his LinkedIn profile. That was part of his overall messaging, that people who would work with him could expect to increase their revenues on average 30%. And then that shows somebody what they can expect if they work with you.
Now, was that message a part of the about section of LinkedIn, or was it literally in their title? In other words, business consultant consistently delivering 30% returns on revenue. Was it part of that profile
Yeah.
title?
It was actually, so no one could miss it. It was right in the headline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, how often, when you're trying to talk with these people, is it hard to get them to maybe be a little bit, I don't say brash, but confident to really show that they are the trusted advisor, sharing their knowledge and kind of using the law of reciprocity by giving away some free information to show that they have knowledge in order to get people to respond, to raise their hand, to ask them questions, to maybe turn into a client?
I do find, Glenn, that some of my clients are very hesitant to talk up themselves. You don't want to brag, but you want to do it in a way that is fair and doing justice to yourself. So I sometimes need to coach them and talk them into that and explain that, again, they're sharing their value. They can do so many wonderful things. You need to let other people know. And I also find that people often don't think about, like you mentioned, giving something away. And that's the best way for somebody to get a little taste of what you do. So I will have my clients, for example, maybe offer a free assessment if they're a career coach, maybe provide 10 job search tips, something like that, that opens the door, shows that you have knowledge, and begins that relationship.
Now, in terms of being able to talk about yourself, and this is a topic obviously that I cover quite a bit in many different areas of communication, especially in leadership communication, being able to share stories and inviting in third party validation. In other words, instead of talking about how good you were, you talk about what your client experienced, what they said, what they did, how they progressed, what was their transformation. And then I'm going to cherry pick a little bit of what you spoke about just a few minutes ago. If you add in a little bit of that vulnerability, in other words, I wasn't 100% sure we were going to come to this place, but I got to tell you, my client stepped up and was able to do these things, and I learned some things along the way. I mean, there's that vulnerability in your narrative that's really covering, I think, a lot of the bases that you promote to your clients.
Yeah, that's a great way of talking about a success story. And I loved how you framed that, Paul, where you were a little hesitant in the beginning that you could achieve those results. And it makes the results that you achieved all the more powerful by setting it up like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I always advise my clients to get testimonials because, as you were saying, there's nothing better than a happy customer singing your praises. Then you're not bragging, somebody else is bragging about you.
Well, and let me give all of our listeners, all of our viewers, a little tip. When it comes to getting those testimonials, be proactive about it. Do not simply ask for a testimonial. Literally invite them to be on a Zoom and say, I'd like to record this. Let me ask you a few questions, because you need to break down the walls. Because people, if you have to give a testimonial, they're going to sit and fret about what they're going to say. All you have to do is ask them some important questions that you know are going to be answered in the affirmative, and just have a conversation. You can be in there, and guess what? That's even better, because now they see the interaction between you and an existing client, and they're able to transfer that to their, what could be their potential experience working with you. So just my little tip, having been through the wars.
No, that's a great tip. Another tip along those same lines is to save your client work. So I'll often say, would you like me to sort of start off the testimonial so you don't have to waste your energies thinking about it? Give them a little bit of a testimonial and they can then enhance or add their own flavor to it.
Well, and don't you think that just adds to, in today's video world, instead of saying, when someone says, do you have references? You can say, sure. Take a look at my YouTube channel. Take a look at my LinkedIn with my video testimonials. That way you don't have to bother clients or previous customers as much with references. They can just see what they had to say about you, and it kind of just cuts through some of the maybe time to build that respect, build that rapport with prospective clients.
Yes, that's a great suggestion, Glenn. And that definitely adds to the prospect's feeling of trust if they can see a number of people saying how much you help them.
Now, in terms of marketing, just to take the topic of proactive and what Glenn had just said about sending testimonials, why wait until they say, do you have any references? Why not send the testimonials ahead of time and just say, thought you might be interested in seeing some of the success stories that I've experienced with some wonderful clients. And there you go. They can just take a look at it. So you're actually priming the pump prior to whatever initial contact or face-to-face you're going to have, simply because I guess it just makes the decision making easier. People we know, like, and trust.
Yeah, I like that very much about in the initial stage of the relationship to be able to send those testimonials, and it definitely helps the client make a decision to work with you if they're able to see somebody that looks, sounds like them, and they know that you help them.
Right.
In today's day and age, there are so many mediums out there that marketers want to say, this is the new thing, this is what's hot now, this is what's popular now. But for people that are providing services to customers, do you have any advice as far as platforms which may be good for them, or maybe the juice just isn't worth the squeeze and they may spend more money to advertise or to promote themselves and they're going to get a return on their investment?
I find with my clients, many of whom are actually coaches and consultants, that LinkedIn is a phenomenal platform. It's the number one professional platform. People are there not to necessarily have fun, but to benefit their career. And you can be extremely targeted on LinkedIn in terms of whom you want to reach out to. And if you have the right messaging, and I also help my clients with that, you can get a good response rate when you go out, even if you're cold calling on LinkedIn.
Now, do you find is that the most difficult arm wrestling that you do with clients, which is paring it down to what their actual niche really is? Because often, I know my mindset decades ago was, well, why would I want to speak to these people? I'll be excluding those people. But ultimately, as Glenn always says, if you're trying to market to everyone, you're marketing to no one.
Yeah, that is so important, and something that I want to underscore 5 times. And I find that when I'm dealing with prospects or my clients, that they're often, as you said, Paul, very hesitant to streamline what they're doing. They've done so much in their lives, and my clients are typically experienced professionals, so they have a whole litany of things that they've done, and they're hesitant to have that focus. But without that focus, it's very difficult to market because, as you indicated, people don't know what you do. You're not being able to talk specifically to an audience and to hone your message to that audience.
Mm-hmm.
So if we could talk a little bit about branding. I hear it's said probably more than it should be and overused. In my opinion, branding means if someone looks at me on LinkedIn, if they look at me on Facebook, Twitter, a website, that I have a constant message out there. This is what I do. This is who I work with. This is where I'm going for. Do you help people, because you mentioned about having that title there, just because we only have a few seconds to catch people's attention, about making sure that everything is up there to them as quickly as possible and consistent across all internet properties?
that consistency is extremely important. I had one person I worked with, she called herself one name, believe it or not, on LinkedIn, another on her website. You had no idea who this woman was. And you want to look the same, be the same on different platforms. Now, obviously, you're going to tailor your content a bit to the different platforms, but you don't want to be talking about your expertise as a cake maker if you're a mindset coach, or you don't want something that's out in left field.
All right. Now, what about when you want to branch into a bigger market? Are there certain signals that you have to get in terms of viability of what it is that you're selling, your service or your product in that market, before you can actually begin to fashion all of that messaging? In other words, do you have to have a track record, or do you follow intuition? What do you do when you know that you want to expand? In other words, you're not going into an unrelated market, but you're going into one that maybe you haven't hit the ball out of the park in just yet. Are there certain things that you're looking for in order to get the green light to go ahead with that?
So, for example, if I understand you, Paul, let's say you're doing individual coaching and you want to expand to group coaching, or I don't know if that is what you're talking about.
Yeah, something like that.
Your experience has been in individual coaching. What I suggest if people want to expand what they're doing is to actually do it without selling. So, for example, if you want to get into group coaching and you've done the individual coaching, you might want to create a group where you're initially maybe not even charging, or charging very little for your services. So it's a no-brainer for people to sign up. Then you can get happy customers who can talk about what a great group coach you are, and then go and expand what you're offering. Mm-hmm. But you're not going to start as a master till you actually master it yourself and have some proof points.
Right.
Now, going along with that, how often do you see people have what I call disconnected marketing? So I'm out promoting service A, product A, whatever you want to call it. And when I do it, there's just a link to the homepage of my website. It's not a link to a page that's going to back up, reinforce, maybe with testimonials about that service and or that product. Don't you think that if you have something that's going to anchor that, to give them a little bit more information as they dig deeper into it, it's going to have a lot better conversion, and they're going to see a lot better results for the money they're spending on that marketing?
Yes, you're not going to get far if you have a particular product. You immediately tell people to buy it or sign up. You really want to seed it with good content and explain and give away a little bit of your secret sauce without truly giving it away. But to make it very appetizing and enticing so people want to know more, and then they're really eager to sign up.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, the customer journey is something that has to be strategized. You have to have an idea, first of all, who your target market is, but then you have to look at what that journey feels like. And that requires getting some feedback. So how much data, how much does data affect decisions when it comes to effective branding and marketing?
You do often need to test what you're doing. So let's say you want to veer a little bit from what you've been doing and you're not quite sure which direction. You could go in a few different directions. You might want to do something as simple as put up a LinkedIn poll. Tell people thinking of moving in this new direction, and see what response you get, and give them three choices and see what gets the most response. That's one simple way to get some data. You can also go out to existing customers and sound some of them out in terms of where you want to go. You can also do some quick and dirty research using a tool like SurveyMonkey, where you're maybe going out to your LinkedIn audience, for example, and getting some feedback. Because when you're going in a new direction, you can obviously go many different ways, and you want to be able to find that messaging and the actual service that you're going to be selling, that there's a true need for that. People are going to raise their hand and want to move forward. And you can do that with some simple testing. You don't have to hire a market research firm. You can do your own research.
Okay. I have a question for both of you guys, and that is, we've already established that for coaches and service providers in various areas, that LinkedIn is a really good platform, but regardless of what social media platform you're using, is there a point where you use the social media platform for prospecting, but it becomes imperative and essential that you get that potential client off social media and into your email list, into your email chain? Glenn, what's been your experience with that? And at what point is there a definitive point where, it's almost like being in the friend zone? At some point, with somebody that you're interested in romantically, ooh, I missed the window there, and now we're just stuck in the friend zone. Have you experienced, or do you try to avoid at all costs being stuck in the social media connection zone?
I think that, and this is maybe a poor analogy, but it's kind of separating the buyers from the liars. You'd rather have someone say no than to say maybe. So it's just getting to that answer, either a yes or a no. And I think in this day and age, there's so much noise out there between all these different properties that if you can have multiple modes of contacting them to finally get them to that position, your odds of getting them on a call, I've been saying this for years. If you're trying to go out and talk to people, if you will go out and knock on doors, you have to contact this many people a day. If you want to send emails so it's easier to ignore, you have to send this many. If you're trying to go through LinkedIn messaging, you have to send this many. So the easier it is to ignore you, the more contacts you have to have. So it's just trying to find different ways around and different ways to get in front of the right people to then basically get the old thing down to where now we're going to have a talk, now we're going to have a presentation, now we're going to get to sales. You used to have a lot more irons in the fire, if you will, because there's so much noise in today's world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's truly a numbers game. And you may go out to 5 people and get nothing. Well, 5 people is really far, far too small. You need to have a large sample. And the more people you go out to, the more you're likely to find somebody who is going to be receptive to what you're doing. And that helps break through the noise.
Okay. Well, now let's have a little reality check for everyone who is considering leaning in harder into their marketing, or really jumping into it with both feet. How long does it take? At what point should you start to expect to see some results, some fruits from your labor? And when is it too early to be disappointed? I realize every situation is different, but can you give us an average, an idea, just so that we all can wrap our heads around just how long it really does take?
I run a 3-month program for my clients. And the first month is devoted to messaging, positioning, and creating a marketing document for them. So that's 1 month. The second month, and also redoing their LinkedIn profile. because that is truly a 24/7 salesperson for you done right.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that takes about a month. And then in the second month, we're on to getting leads. And I find that people who work with me after, certainly by the end of the 3 months, they're getting a steady stream of leads, and sometimes as early as 2 months. Now, you have not, what was I going to say? You're not advertising, you're not doing 3 million things. My program is very focused on what you're doing, which I think is one reason that it's successful.
Now you've mentioned messaging twice, and just mentioned positioning. And I think that's probably the two of the biggest things that I see business owners having trouble with. Their messaging sometimes are too technical. They get too far down in the weeds that the average person doesn't understand, that it isn't in their field. And they don't really position themselves as the go-to person in that mode, in that medium, in their area. So what are some tips you would give some people to help them with messaging and help them with their positioning?
With the messaging, you need to think about people you've worked with in the past, because as I mentioned, the people I work with are experienced. And ask yourself, what language that you used resonated with the people that you were working with? And excuse me for 1 second. I'm sorry. And ask yourself that question. You also need to look at your competitors and see what their messaging is. You don't want to sound the same as any competitor. You want to find that gap in what the competitors are doing where you can excel. You also want to think back over your work and not only what resonated, but what produced the greatest results, and what pain points were you solving, because people are hiring you to correct something, make something better. And you need to focus on where they're hurting and how you can help and how they'll feel after working with you, which is where those testimonials, the proof points, the results come into play. As far as positioning goes, a lot of that depends on your competitors, and you don't want to be positioned the same as your competitors. So, for example, if you're a coach, and let's say a mindset coach, and there's a zillion mindset coaches out there, but you have a different approach. You're also a fitness expert, and you've been able to combine your fitness program with mindset, that the two go hand in hand, and you're elevating your mindset. And you can talk about yourself in a way that's going to completely differentiate you from the ordinary mindset. And you might emphasize yoga or some cardiac routine, or cardio rather routine. So that is a very helpful exercise in terms of positioning, to do a competitive analysis and realize how you can stand out from what these competitors are doing. And there's nothing wrong with borrowing from these competitors. We all learn from each other, but you just don't want to be a complete facsimile of what the competitor is.
No, we borrow all the time. It's like a free market out here in terms of, I like the sound of that. Interesting. Well, Now, I want to go back just for a moment to what you said about the language and the way that a statement is framed. And I'm going to share a story that I heard. This is third party. This is one that I heard, and I'm paraphrasing right now. But apparently, a woman with a nutrition background decided that she might have even been a retired nurse, but she decided that she wanted to put together a program for healthier eating for nurses because their schedules can be so crazy. They can't grab the food they want. What do you have to do in preparation? How can you get this organized so you can make it happen and you can live a healthier life, have a healthier lifestyle? So she promoted it as being nutrition for nurses, and nobody bought it. Nobody was interested. So what she did was she slightly changed the message to time management for nurses,
Ah,
and then just inserted the same program about food because it's what her area of expertise is, and it went through the roof. So that would just be one example that I had heard of, and I think that it's brilliant, but I think it requires that you see what is working and what isn't working. And in marketing, sometimes we can be so disciplined and listen to all of the gurus and listen to all of the experts, but sometimes you have to know when to make a slight adjustment, and where doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is truly marketing insanity.
I actually had that experience with my own business. When I started, I had recently published or had published my book, Thriving at 50 Plus. And I hung out my shingle as an expert working with people 50 plus who wanted to reinvent themselves. And I found that I was not getting a lot of takers, or the people that I were getting were people who couldn't afford to pay me. They were out of work and fairly desperate and of course I tried to help them, but it didn't help me in terms of getting any revenues. And what I realized was that, one, I wasn't playing to my strengths. I'm not an expert career coach, I'm an expert marketer. And I tweaked, just like in your example, Paul, what I'm doing so that instead of focusing on people 50 plus, I'm focusing on small business owners who need to nail their marketing, their branding, and messaging to grow their business. And I'm finding I'm attracting a lot of fit people who are 50 plus. It's just I'm coming at it in the back door instead of the front door.
Mm-hmm. The exact same. That's a
Yeah.
beautiful story that parallels both. Glenn, do you have one like that too? Are we going to go for 3 times the charm?
Well, I think it's what we're talking about here is finding the pain point. When you find a pain point that gets somebody to open a message, that then you can start relating to them. Then you can start, start promoting solutions for them. It's just that your nurse found the pain point. Nurses were frustrated about not being organized and didn't realize that food prep could help them do that. So it's just doing a little bit of testing, like Wendy was talking about, and finding that pain point. And when you find that pain point, and it may take a few times, it can be huge. I've worked in a specific niche for years, and believe it or not, by knowing the exact pain point, I've been able to get 60 to 70% open rate for cold emails, which is unheard of. But you had to find that pain point, and it isn't always easy, and sometimes you have to fail a lot before you
Right.
finally succeed.
And doesn't a little bit of that fall into, oh, this is going to be a really tricky word. The word is intuition. You have to have a little bit of intuition, but yet sometimes you can't trust your intuition. So let's talk about some of I think you just touched on it, Glenn, how sometimes things become counterintuitive. Do you have experience with that, Wendy?
One thing, and we've kind of touched on this earlier, what I find is that small business owners often think the more the merrier. So if they offer, it's kind of like one of those Chinese buffets. They offer everything under the sun and think, well, somebody will grab something. And instead, people end up not grabbing anything because it's overwhelming. I remember one person I was talking to, he had so much going on his website. I had no idea what this gentleman was doing or selling. And too many people do that. It's not the more the merrier. It's coming up, as Glenn was saying earlier, coming up with that service that's going to, or offer that's going to solve somebody's discomfort, their pain, and make them feel that and know that they're going to get rid of that and they're going to move forward. And if you can do that, that is going to make the world a world of difference.
I was on a call yesterday with marketers, and it was kind of interesting. One thing that came up was the false sense of I am doing what I need to do because I'm busy. Because sometimes it's always easy to be busy and not efficient. So what advice do you give them when they're saying, I send out this many emails a day, I made a post and this many people looked at it, this many people may have liked it, but if no one's contacting you, if no one's raising their hand and saying, Wendy, I want to work with you, is anything you're doing really effective?
If you're not getting, you're doing a lot of, as he's put it, busy work, and you're not getting people wanting to connect, something is off. Either you don't have the right messaging, you have the wrong audience that you're targeting. So you need to go back to square one and analyze what you're doing and figure out what you can tweak. It may be a very simple thing. It just may be approaching the wrong people. And just by changing your audience, you're going to get that response. Or maybe even changing 2 words in your message that can make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
So how much, like, if you don't mind real quick, Paul, back to what Paul mentioned, coaching, having coaches, how often do you see where they're just this much off, but they can't see the forest for the trees? And by getting an outsider to say, hey, try this, now all of a sudden the floodgates open.
Yes, I find that very often. And you get so close to things yourself that you just don't see it. And oftentimes it's not a major transformation, but doing a little polishing and tweaking. And that can make a huge difference too.
Is there an important factor, which is volume, is really the amount of touches that you have, the amount of people that you do reach out to on a regular basis? In other words, can you even get a clear indication of what is going on with your marketing if you're only reaching out to 20 or 30 people in a week? Doesn't it need to be more of a volume play when it comes to marketing?
It definitely does. Unless you're offering something that is so amazing, the greatest thing since sliced bread, and anybody would be an idiot not to buy from you. But most of us are offering value, but not that most amazing thing in the world. So you do need to have that volume. And you're not, the other thing is that just going out to a handful of people, the timing may be off. They may have just started a business. They're not interested in what you have to offer. So that's why, another reason why you have to go out to many. And you're not going to be serving the world. You're right for a select group of people. So by going out to many, you're going to hit that select group. It would be great if we could pinpoint right away that select group, but it's not that targeted. You're targeted, but you're not so laser focused that it's a slam dunk when you do it.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about expectations. If hypothetically, I'll ask both of you, if I were to send out 500 requests or 500 emails, messages, whatever they might be, what would be a pretty darn good return on those 500? In other words, just people raising their hand going, "Oh, I'll take a closer look," or "Yeah, sure, I'll connect with you," or whatever it might be. What would you consider to be successful, and what would you consider to be go back to the drawing board?
The old adage, it depends. If you don't have everything that Wendy was talking about up front, if you're doing it on LinkedIn, you don't have that profile done. If you're not doing everything to anchor it, 1% might be great. If you're doing a good job to anchor it and you've done all the work that Wendy said, 3% is probably going to be average. So it depends on if you've done everything right. You know, if you just try and put a roof up without a foundation and walls, it's probably not going to last very long. So it depends on how good you've done preparing.
Right, exactly. And it's also helpful to test. So if you do that first 500 and you see you're getting that 5% or whatever response rate, then you do another group of 500 and see, are you continuing to get that same response rate, or was that just a fluke? So you want to analyze your performance.
And we've heard that phrase here before on Blabbit. You have to definitely market to the right people with the right message at the right time. Those are three very, very important variables. And we've been talking about trying to pinpoint the market. And sometimes that you can know the pain points, have the message just right, but the timing isn't right. And it's not even necessarily a seasonal thing. It can be an individual thing, whether an individual is truly ready to have that conversation, take that next step forward or not. And that's the gray area of marketing. You cannot predict. You cannot, as much as, you know, we listen to each other's insights and whatnot. I think it's what keeps us interested and intrigued is the things we think are going to be slam dunks, not necessarily always, but sometimes we get pleasantly surprised as well.
Yes, that's very true. And there is that question mark in all of the marketing that you do. And oftentimes trial and error really is your friend.
Well, and don't you think, Wendy, when we were talking about communicating with so many people, it depends on how many times you've touched in the past. So if I'm just sending out 500 to this group, then 500 to another group, and 500 to another group, and not re-engaging with the first group, or especially engaging with people that maybe responded, you know, sometimes it takes multiple touches to get something that will make them raise their hand. And again, with timing, I send a message out to you today, and you may not be ready for it. But if I keep sending a message out every week or two, maybe next month or the following month, when you get that message, now you're ready for it, and it kind of resonates with previous messages.
Yes, I think that's a very good point. I typically advise people to send at least 3 messages, send the message, then send a follow-up message, and then send another message. And I also find that people may not respond, but 6 months later, they respond. I've had that happen myself. And like you were saying, the timing was off, but people haven't forgotten about you, which is another reason to reactivate some of these people. So if somebody hasn't responded with those 3 touch points, maybe 3 months from now, 6 months from now, just check in if they seem like a worthy prospect for you.
Now, in those 3 potential touches, is there a sharing of content that goes on there, or is that seen as trying to give too much, trying to stoke the fire too much? Where is the balance between sending obviously it has to be some sort of an informative message, but are you sharing content along the way? Thought you might like this, that sort of thing? What do you normally advise? Is it just messages, or is there a splattering of content in there as well within the message?
It depends on your objective. If your goal is, say, and I do this myself, my goal is to get people on a power positioning call. So I will send an initial message out and ask them to, say, connect with me on LinkedIn. And then they may say, oh, great to meet you. Then I'll send another message and explain a little bit about what I do, and also try to ask a question or two to engage them. And then I will.
Wow, that was a quick response.
And then you'll cue the music. That always gets me.
I forgot to turn off my phone.
That's okay.
Good. So, and then the third response that, assuming they say, oh, this sounds really interesting, can you tell me more? And then I'll suggest that we hop on this power positioning call and explain what that is. And I'll also, if somebody doesn't initially respond, I may
I'll just throw it out the door, Wendy.
I'm gonna throw that phone out. Too bad it's a new one, though.
Oh, those are the worst.
She's just trying to prove a point that when you have constant messages, you have constant phone calls.
There you go. That's right. Get the phone to ring.
Right.
Loud and clear. Message received loud and clear. Well, let me ask you a quick question. When you don't get a response to a message, what's a good amount of time to wait for message number 2? Again, no response, follow-up message. What would you say? Because you don't want to lose.
No.
You don't know. Again, timing is a strange thing. And I know, to go back to Glenn's famous phrase, I'm sure I'll have a t-shirt on next week. It depends. I understand that. But what do you normally do? You send a message on Monday, maybe you do a follow-up on Thursday, or you wait till the next Monday. What would be your general advice?
I'm actually quicker than that. I will send, let's say I'm sending that message on Monday and I don't get a response. I'll send the next day or two, I will send another note and say, I don't, you may, I just want to make sure you saw this, or something like that. Mm-hmm. Something very brief that's not annoying. And then if I don't hear something back after that, I lay low. I don't go back again. And that may be somebody that I'll put on a list that I go back to 3 months from now or something like that, if they seem like they could be potentially a good fit. But,
is there anything?
Don't be annoying, Paul.
It's in my DNA. What do you do? Is there anything you can do to somehow enhance their ability to see the posts that you put in? Let's just focus on LinkedIn. Let's say they do connect with you. Is there any algorithm that we should know about that allows for that new connection to see some of your posts and therefore gain some of that content? Or is it just left to the winds of chance?
If they're following you, you're, again, assuming your post is relatively popular, they should be seeing that in their feed. The other thing that you can do is, if you did a spectacular post that you think would be relevant to somebody you're going after, send them a quick email and say, in case you missed this, thought this would be useful or helpful.
That's cool.
Like that. You can also tag them in a post.
Okay. Good.
Well, Paul, our time has flown by yet once again. Where'd the time go?
I know. And Glenn, I think we're going to have to start incorporating musical accompaniment I thought
think
that was it definitely broke things up a little bit from the talking heads.
My phone.
Very good. Wendy, if anyone would like to get in touch with you, and I'm sure they will, what's the best way to do that?
Okay, there's two good ways. One is to connect with me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn.com/Wendy A. Marx, MARX. You can also email me. The easiest email is Wendy Marx, MARX @gmail.com. And I welcome hearing from anybody. I love to get to know more people and help as many people as I can.
Excellent. Great tips. Thank you, Wendy.
Yes. Thank you very much for joining us, Wendy.
Oh, well, I loved talking with you. And like you said, the time went so fast. And I'm glad that I could add a little levity with my phone ring.
Excellent.
Technology. All right. Glenn.
Have a good week. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.